Please take your seats. We will start our session.
Then because it really is. I know.
Hope you enjoyed last night's reception. And as you know, we have a few agenda items to consider in the plenary. And if we are very efficient, then we can complete the consideration of all the substantive items by the plenary in the morning, if we try. No. If we try very hard. And devote maybe the afternoon to contact groups. But we have to be very efficient in that case. So today, first, let us have a quick report back from the two contact groups. Contact group on VSLS, which was held yesterday, and today morning we had the contact group on atmospheric monitoring. So first, I would like to give the floor to one of the chairs of the VSLS contact group. Heidi.
We had our second meeting in the contact group on very short-lived substances yesterday over lunch. This time we had the proponents present the CRP again, and then we started a discussion of the operational paragraphs. However, we could not manage to finalize the discussion, and we would therefore welcome additional time in this meeting to at least have a chance to go through all the operational paragraphs. Thank you.
Two meetings, and therefore we will try to give some more time, maybe later in the week. And now I would like to give the floor to one of the co-chairs of the contact group on monitoring, atmospheric monitoring. Who would? Alessandro?
We had our first contact group this morning. We had a very interesting sessions on questions and answers, and I think we might need some additional time and for go along with our work. So we are in your hands when you want to provide us another slot during the week. Thank you also on behalf of my co-chair.
And at the slot, maybe tomorrow, the time and the room will be projected on the screen later. With that, I would like to hand over to my co-chair, Ralph.
And as Maruza said, we really would like to speed up a little bit. And let's say when we speed up and we are ready this morning, there are several delegations, especially England and me, would be very happy because we have some time to watch an important game. So, let's say, and what is nicer than make a co-chair happier for you? So, and maybe I'm even happier after 6 o'clock, but you never know. I would like now to go back to a CRP or agenda item 3B on feedstock uses of controlled substances. There was a CRP put forward, and I would like to give the floor to Australia to introduce the CRP.
And good morning to everyone. Yes, on behalf of this delegation, Canada, Norway and Switzerland, we are happy to introduce CRP4 into plenary, which is a draft decision on feedstock uses of controlled substances. As this and other delegations mentioned during our discussions on this agenda item on the first day, we were expressed concern about the increasing use of feedstock and therefore the subsequent increasing emissions that would be coming from feedstock uses of controlled substances, I think which has been seen in the atmospheric measurements of these controlled substances. So we have coordinated on CRP4, which we have put forward for consideration, which essentially reflects those concerns and urges parties to do their best and to take steps to minimise their emissions of controlled substances, either used as feedstocks or produced for feedstock use, or in their transportation, storage, distribution, handling, repackaging in the supply chain of these substances being used as feedstock. So this is about OP1 is continue taking steps to minimise the emissions of these substances. Operational paragraph 2 is encouraging parties to use the best practices to reduce emissions. Paragraph 3 clarifies the reporting requirements that unintentional production should be reported where such production is measurable. And then paragraphs 4 and 5 are a little bit more policy oriented in terms of trying to get a sense from parties that have national procedures and frameworks in place for the management of such production and use, that sharing that information and sharing information about those national frameworks with the Ozone Secretariat, and then asking this Ozone Secretariat to summarise that information. So that we feel could be quite a useful compendium of approaches that might be useful for parties. And then the last paragraph is requesting the Executive Committee to consider a small funding envelope to support a couple of production sector related projects to demonstrate best practices and minimising emissions of controlled substances used as feedstock. We feel that this would potentially provide some useful quantitative information for parties that would assist parties in reducing emissions and sharing that information with others. So I am very happy, of course, for our co-sponsors to augment what I have indicated, provided by information, by way of information this morning, but otherwise we would be very happy to look at the CRP in a contact group. Thank you very much, Co-Chair.
The room if there are reactions on the CRP. I see India. India, please, you have the floor.
These issues of feedstock is being discussed for the past many years, and this issues is being raised every year with new elements. And this delegation expressed its views on the issues in details during the OEWG45 and MOF35. We feel there is no point in relating the issues, raising these issues every year, and we feel there is no need for further discussion. The MC Talks can continue to update its progress report. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
On my list, please, Bahrain.
شكرا سيد الرئيس
Thank you, Mr.
المشارك والشكر
Co-Chair.
موصول إلى
Thank
مقدمي
you to the
هذا السي
presenter
استراليا
of
وسويسرا
the CRP
وكندا
of
والنرويج.
Australia,
أنا
Switzerland,
فقط
Canada
بشكل
and
مختصر
Norway.
أود أن
Very
أضم
briefly,
صوتي
I would
إلى
like to join,
ما تفضل به
my
المندوب
voice to
الموقر
what we've
من
just
الهند.
heard from the
ونحن
delegate
بنفس
from
الرؤية
India.
والصدد
We share the
الذي
same
يتكلم
vision,
فيه. شكرا جزيلا
that
سيد
had
الرئيس
been
المشارك.
already expressed, 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 expressed.
Han explicado las delegaciones anteriores, creemos que este tema que se repite
Others
sistemáticamente en
have
cada una de las
said, we believe
reuniones,
that this
por algo es
subject
que
that we are
no hemos
examining
estado
year
en
after
condiciones de
year
poder
during
aprobarlo.
each meeting,
Creo que
but
no
we have
tiene
yet
sentido que
to approve
sigamos
anything
insistiendo
on the
sobre esto,
subject, and
a
in my
menos
view,
que,
there is
y eso,
no
la verdad
sense
que
in
habría que ver primero
continuing
eso y después
to
pedir
insist on
una
this
decisión
issue.
de este tipo, que
Unless,
se armara
and
alguna
truly,
especie de programa
unless
especial y con un financiamiento adicional, porque las
we
cosas que se
have
están pidiendo
a
acá,
specific special program
sinceramente,
with
implican
additional
una
financing,
cantidad de estudios y de
because
investigación
in this document what is
que
being
por lo menos
asked
las unidades
for
nacionales de ozono
is
en
for
esta
studies to be
situación
carried
no
out
estaríamos
and for national ozone
en
services
situación de
to
poder
be
hacerlo
involved,
si realmente no
but
tenemos
they are not
un programa de
able
trabajo
to
y
be
que
at the
sea
level to carry
financiado
out
por el
these
Fondo Multilateral.
projects
Por lo
unless
menos
it
para
is
conseguir la
funded by the
información de base.
multilateral fund.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Uy, no rep- 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 uy, no rep-
Yes, please.
I think we saw some new information this year in the report, and we certainly asked some questions about the emissions factors, for example, earlier this week, and we also noted some other information in the TEEP report. So from this delegation's point of view, I think we do think this is worth a discussion in a group, and we'd be happy to participate, and we're in your hands as to how you want to establish that. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
Now the EU on my list, and then Norway, so EU, please.
Sponsors for introducing the CRP. As we had a discussion already on this issue, it is quite important. There is the TIEP alerts us to a significant increase in production, significant increase in emissions. It's likely to grow into the future. So it's certainly something we should be at least talking about, what we are going to do about this growing issue of concern. So we very much support having a contact group on this issue and discuss the CRP. Thank you very much.
Norway.
Thank you to the delegate of Australia for presenting the CRP. We have heard carefully to the intervention of previous speakers, and for us, really, it is not really the need for asking the TIP about more information. At this stage, we have received a lot of reports, many of them over the past years. We have received comprehensive information that are reaffirming our concerns. We believe that it is time now that we engage in discussion to figure out which kind of action could be done within this body for addressing this issue. So we will support to have a discussion in a contact group. Thank you, Co-Chair. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But Canada first.
Thank you to the delegate of Australia for introducing this CRP. I just wanted to quickly address some of the points that have been made by some parties. It's true that there has been, several decisions related to feedstock over the past years, but I think those decisions have actually helped the parties in getting a better understanding of these issues. Particularly, this last report provides us with a wealth of information on where controlled substances for feedstocks are used, potential emissions, as well as a review of possible alternatives and alternatives pathways to substitute the use of controlled substances. So I think it's just in recognition of this report and acknowledging what appears to be potentially very, very significant emissions coming from the production and use of controlled substances as feedstock, that in this draft decision, we now turn not again to the TEEP, because I think, India mentioned, we could ask the TEEP to update its reports, and I think, yes, they will do that for the quadrennial assessment, but as Norway indicated, this is not really the purpose that we're looking at here. We're looking at what it is that could be done as parties to address this issue. And I think what's being asked, is not something that would actually involve a significant burden to parties. The first paragraph is in a sense reiterating and reminding parties of decision 412, where we agreed to minimize emissions of ODS coming from feedstock uses. The second paragraph I just want to come back to, but just to say then the other ask of parties is in paragraph 4 is an invitation to submit information. So clearly, this is for parties who are interested and who want to provide information. We don't see that this creates a burden or that there's a need for financing in order for parties to do that. If you want to refuse the invitation, then you're free to do that. So really here what's new perhaps is a second paragraph in terms of encouraging parties to promote the use of best practices and technologies, which we think is probably one of the most important here in this draft decision, because really based on what the TEEP has provided, in the short term at least, the most feasible way to reduce emissions is through the application of best practices and technologies at the plant level. And for this, it was mentioned, if something needs to be done, there should be some financing attached to it, where there is a request for the XCOM in paragraph 6 to consider establishing a funding envelope to support up to 2 production sector projects to demonstrate best practices and technology. So the only significant ask for parties, first of all, is just an encouragement, and that encouragement is linked to a financial request to the multilateral fund in order to support it. So I think we tried, the co-sponsors tried to really, draft a decision that would make some steps towards addressing this issue, wouldn't impose too much burden on Article 5 or non-Article 5 countries, and when it does, to link it to some provision of some financing. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
Amy, please.
نشكر حقيقة الفريق التقني وجميع اللجان التي أعدت هذه الدراسة وهذه المقترحات التي أثرت حقيقة خلفياتنا العلمية والأدبية بطريقة أو بأخرى. إلا أن لي بعض الملاحظات. هذه المواد الوسيطة صناعيا يفترض أنها مستهلكة لإنتاج المواد النهائية، مما يعني أننا بحاجة إلى مراقبة انبعاثات التصنيع ومعالجة خطوط الإنتاج للحد من الانبعاثات ومعالجة تلك الانبعاثات من مداخل خطوط الإنتاج بإضافة بعض المواد الكيميائية المعالجة لها. فقد يكون الأولى مراقبة المواد الوسيطة والنهائية فقط عبر مراحل حياتها قاطبة وتداولها من نقل وتخزين وتداول واتجار وغيره، ورفع معدلات السلامة الكيميائية في المصانع والتخزين والتداول، ورفع الوعي لدى عامة الجمهور وخاصتهم للتعامل مع هذه المنتجات وليس المواد الوسيطة فقط. وشكرا على إتاحة الفرصة.
Thank you for allowing me.
And then Libya. And I really would like to ask parties who would like to speak, please indicate, and otherwise I will close the list. So Switzerland and Libya. And I don't see anybody else wanting to have the floor, so I close the list. So first Switzerland. Switzerland, 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 Switzerland.
I'd like to echo the previous interventions from parties who supported to continue the conversations on this important topic of feedstock. Actually, this is not just revisiting the previous conversations we had in the last meetings. There are several very new aspects that we just saw also when the CRP was introduced. In particular, there's this call to the ExCom to consider funding for projects that contribute to reduce emissions from feedstock. This paragraph responds directly to a request that we heard in previous meetings from parties to look for ways to assist parties in this endeavor to reduce feedstock emissions, maybe including capacity building as well. So we think, since we have taken up this request, it would be very important to listen to those parties there and hear out if, in their opinion, this way is a reasonable way forward to address the requests we heard and we talked about in the last meetings. So it's, in view of this delegation, a very important next step to have this discussion in a formal setting and make further steps to reduce emissions from feedstock that, how we learned, are bigger than we have anticipated before. Thank you very much.
Actually, it's Lesotho, not Libya, but it's fine. Actually, I think this is a very good discussion because we understand that to make sure that we achieve our goal as to protect the ozone layer and the environment, we need to fill out every goal or every sector of the cycle, so that at the end of the day we may achieve close to 100% the requirement or the fulfillment of protecting the ozone layer and the environment. I don't think this at a number we are really looking forward to see the achievement under it, because I think it is going to very much assist in terms of maybe touching down on the ground in terms of those substances that still contribute, which we have not yet taken the decision on. So I'm very much looking forward to hear or to see the progress on this agenda. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Currently on the list. I will confer for a moment with my co-chair. After a minute of consultations, we heard the different views here in the room how to proceed, and we are aware of that. And our proposal would be to see if we can continue this discussion or conversation in an informal group. We think it still would be useful to do it in this way, because there are some issues that maybe also can be clarified also by TEEP or SAP or others. So is this a way forward that is acceptable to the room, so that we proceed in an informal group? I don't see any objections to that. So then, let's say that Switzerland, I see Switzerland. Please, Switzerland, 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 Switzerland.
Sorry. Just for clarification, Mr. Co-Chair, would an informal group mean to have the support by co-facilitators and the secretariat?
So clear later, but I can already mention that Michel Gonvin from Canada and Leslie Smith from Grenada are willing to co-facilitate this group. Then I would like to go to the next agenda item, and I have to go through my papers. That's agenda item 9. Please, TEEP, come already here to the podium because it takes some time. Then I will introduce this agenda item. It's a compliance deferral for Article 5 Group 2 parties, and TEEP made a technology review. In paragraph 5 of decision 28/2 related to the GIALI element phasing down HFCs, TEEP was requested to conduct a technology review 4 or 5 years before 28 to consider a compliance deferral of 2 years from the freeze date of 28 for Article 5, Group 2 parties, to address growth above a certain threshold in relevant sectors. Chapter 8 of the 24 progress report of TEEP sets out the panel's response to that request. The progress report is available on the portal, and a summary is set out in document 46/2 at 1. So Team members, if you are seated, then I would like to ask you to make the presentation. And after the presentation, we have first a question and answer session. And I would like to ask Teep to be concise and brief and quick. And also the question and answer session, please be very specific in your questions. And then we have a more substantive discussion. But first, Teep will present their report. Please start.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. On behalf, good morning, distinguished delegates, participants to the 46th Open-Ended Working Group meeting. On behalf of the TEEP and my working group co-chairs, Sueli Carvalho and Helen Walter Terraroni, I'm very pleased to begin the presentation of our response to Decision 28-2, Paragraph 5, a technical review of the alternatives relevant to Group 2 parties, which was Chapter 8 of the TEEP 2024 Progress Report. Decision 28-2, it was 8 years ago now. It was the decision, as the parties know, that established the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. I refer to that because this paragraph 4 of Decision 28-2 requested the TEEP to conduct periodic reviews of alternatives beginning in 2022 and every 5 years thereafter. It requested the TEEP to use the criteria set out in a previous decision, 26-9, paragraph 1A, and to provide its technical and economic assessment of the latest available and emerging alternatives to HFCs. So our first report, responding to paragraph 4, was in 2022. It was the September 2022 report, working group report on alternatives to HFCs. It was primarily based on the work that was ongoing at the time in the development of the 2022 TEEP and TOX assessment reports, which are shown there. Paragraph 5 of the decision requested the TEEP to conduct a technology review 4 or 5 years before 2028. So this is our current report, responding to paragraph 5 of the 2016 decision. It requested TEEP to do a technical review in order for parties to consider a compliance deferral for Article 5 Group 2 parties to address growth above a certain threshold in relevant sectors. Decision 28-2 established the Article 5 Group 2 parties as those listed here: Bahrain, India, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. I don't have a slide here, but I just wanted to quickly review that the decision that established the criteria by which TEEP was to review and conduct this technical review, Decision 26-9, paragraph 1A, asked TEEP to update information on alternatives, considering energy efficiency, regional differences, and high ambient temperature conditions, in particular assessing whether they are commercially available, technically proven, environmentally sound, economically viable and cost-effective, safe to use, and easy to service and maintain. I just wanted to clarify that those were the criteria that we were asked to include in our technical review. In response to this decision in paragraph 5, TEEP established a working group from within its membership, including senior experts and the co-chairs of the various technical options committee. It also included experts from the RTOC, for which we were grateful for their contributions to our report. We would also take the opportunity at this time to thank the Ozone Secretariat and the Multilateral Fund Secretariat for their support of our work. In terms of this current 2024 technical review by the TEEP, this was a one-time assessment requested by the decision to respond to paragraph 5. And so we based our technical review, our current technical review, primarily on the September 2022 report. I will note that the 2022 technical review by the TEEP on alternatives to HFCs was conducted globally. The review focused on alternatives in all the relevant sectors. And in the current report, we have primarily focused on those sectors relevant to Group 2 parties. Where the information remains the same, we did not duplicate that information in our 2022 report. We refer to that report. Where there were sector updates that were notable for this 2024 review, as well as for Group 2 parties, we note that in the relevant sector sections. TEEP also considered, because this decision was back in 2016, and a lot has changed in 8 years in terms of a sort of progress in the transition and the phase down in HFCs. So we also considered what has happened, relevant changes that have happened since that decision and are relevant to Group 2 parties. We looked at updates to standards for refrigerants, as well as refrigeration, air conditioning, and heat pump equipment. We looked at technology conversion investment and demonstration projects that have been approved, implemented, or under implementation since 2016. And we looked at potential indicative activities happening in Group 2 parties that we saw in the 2024 to 2026 business plan under the Multilateral Fund. So our approach to respond to paragraph 5 was based on the terms of reference. We focused on our technical review on the alternatives relevant to Group 2 parties, as requested by the decision. We did not attempt to assess the individual national market dynamics or possible implementations plans, as those are not available to us. We did not qualify whether the alternatives would enable Group 2 parties to achieve certain reductions by certain dates. These would require us to have considered factors beyond those that were specified in the decision in terms of the criteria. We did not attempt to assess the relative ability of specific Group 2 parties to comply with certain control measures. Again, information in terms of their own implementation plans were not available to us. So TEEP defers to parties to consider, or not, any changes to the phase-down schedules. This is simply an outline of our report for this decision, and we'll follow this outline as we go through our presentation today. With that, I'll turn it over to our working group member and RTOC co-chair, Omar Abdulaziz. Thank you.
Focuses on the status of alternatives in the RACHP sectors relevant to Group 2 parties. The RACHP sector continues to dominate the HFC consumption. In the TEEP 2016 report, it was estimated that the RACHP contributes to approximately 80% of the global GWP-weighted HFC emissions. More recently, country program data reported to the Multilateral Fund Secretariat by 117 out of 144 Article 5 parties show the same approximate range of 80% GWP-weighted emissions in the RACHP sector. The 2022 report findings remain relevant. lower GWP alternatives to the popular high GWP HFCs are available for most RACHP applications, but there is limited accessibility to alternatives for some Article 5 parties. There is still rapid development of new lower GWP refrigerants. There are a number of significant RACHP applications with widely available alternatives with GWP less than 10. Examples include hydrocarbons, CO2, ammonia, and hydrofluoroolefins. And for some applications, alternatives with GWP of up to 750 can quickly be adopted, like HFC 32 and HFC HFO refrigerant blend R454B. While the technology is mature and lower GWP refrigerants are available, there is still some minimal use of high GWP HFCs in new equipment. Lower GWP alternatives adoption can be increased by measures to discourage import of equipment with high GWP HFCs, awareness programs related to lower GWP alternatives, and training related to the use of flammable refrigerants. As presented in the TEEP September 2022 report and remains relevant to all Article 5 parties, including Group 2 parties, some applications remain reliant on high GWP refrigerants, but these are in sectors with small consumptions relative to other RACHP applications, including transport refrigeration and ultra-low temperature systems. In transport refrigeration, including vans, trucks, and containers, R404A was the main refrigerant of choice. Now, the HFC HFO refrigerant blend R452A is widely available, and there are also other low GWP options under development. For ultra-low temperature systems like freezers for vaccines at -70 degrees C, cascade refrigeration system is used and can typically employ very high GWP gases like HFC perfluorocarbon or PFC refrigerant blend R508B. Lower GWP options are mainly in development stage. The working group found some commonalities among G2 parties, including most G2 parties have manufacturing enterprises producing RACHP units with local or mixed ownership and with varying capabilities for research and development. At least one G2 party, India, also manufactured components that are used for building RACHP units like compressors or motors. Manufactured units are mostly sold locally, but some parties have significant output made for export and need to respond to the importing party's requirement. All Group 2 parties are in geographically region with similar climatic conditions, although one party, India, is not defined as high ambient temperature country as per the definition set by the decision 28.2, paragraph 29. All Group 2 parties have minimum energy performance standards in place. However, the MEPs are not harmonized and use different temperature settings for the efficiency ratings and use different minimum efficiency levels. Group 2 parties are at varying stages of HCFC phase out, with some more advanced than the Montreal Protocol control targets. Due to the HCFC phase out by 2024, the use of HCFC refrigerants in Article 5 parties has significantly decreased. All Group 2 parties import HFC-based units across most RACHP applications. The criteria specified in paragraph 1A of decision 26-9 that TEEP was requested to consider in its technical review: commercial availability, technically proven, environmental soundness, economic viability and cost effectiveness, safety, and ease to service and maintain. We found these criteria similar to the ones used in 2022 report. They are fully explained in this year's technical review, as well as the backup slides attached to the posted presentation. For the criteria of commercial availability, we consider both availability and accessibility of refrigerants and RACHP products. TEEP recognizes that some refrigerants that are commercially available globally are not necessarily accessible in all Article 5 parties. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. For the criterion of environmentally sound, TEEP recognizes that environmental soundness is a relative term and can depend on the geographical region. There are variations that are a factor of either policy and local legislation or of certain industry trends that are specific to some parties. Group 2 parties are in the mainstream of environmental stewardship, particularly since the region's hosting of COP28 and its breakthrough decisions. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. For the criterion of economically viable and cost-effective, TEEP recognized that the industrialized Article 5 parties might find some substances viable or mandatory for export, but not for the local market. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. The criterion of safe to use in areas with high urban densities addresses the fact that some of the Article 5 parties have still not adopted international standards, while in others, even if the standard is accepted, it is not mandatory. The criterion also addresses the question of whether those parties have facilities for testing and the capabilities to test as per the standards. At higher ambient temperatures, the capacity of air conditioning equipment may need to be larger depending on the room size, which limits refrigerant charge with flammable refrigerants. On the criterion of ease to maintain or service, TEEP recognizes that all Article 5 parties may require training and mandatory certification procedures, like prescribing a minimum set of tools required for servicing flammable refrigerants. The 2024 TEEP decision 3511 on life cycle refrigerant management task force report categorizes leak minimization techniques by groups of parties based on their consumption. Group 2 parties fall within 3 groups of higher consumption brackets and share common characteristics with the other parties in those brackets. An example is India, which is a manufacturing hub for passenger vehicles by many global multinational companies. Those companies continue to use HFC 134A for vehicles manufactured for the local market, even though their parent companies might have switched to HFO 1234IF. In India, the cost involved to refill with HFO 1234IF is now as much as 5 to 10 times more expensive than that of HFC 134A. India might also consider manufacturing passenger vehicles for export using HFO 1234IF. However, that may not enable India to switch all its production to that substance. Another factor is related to the difficulties facing technicians operating at high ambient temperature conditions and their well-being. TEEP concluded that these conditions occur irrespective of the substance use, and the flammability of the refrigerant does not pose a higher risk at those conditions. TEEP did not find a distinguishing factor for Group 2 parties in this criterion. On the criterion of technically proven, TEEP considers that it is possible to produce a system using certain refrigerants that are accessible and technically proven in non-Article 5 parties, whilst the local industries or consumers in Group 2 parties might have reservation in accepting the product. There can be many reasons, including that the product is not tested for safety as per some international standards, lack of regulations, market pushback, lack of spare parts, lack of adequate training, and flammability or toxicity issues. Another factor that was considered by TEEP is the applicability to HAT conditions. Even though India is not listed as HAT party, yet still it has local regions that experience HAT conditions and require HAT-compatible products. HAT compatibility is related to energy efficiency and cooling capacity, both of which degrade with the increase in ambient temperature, especially for air-cooled products. Having taken all the above criteria into consideration for Group 2 parties, the only distinguishing criteria for accessibility in Group 2 parties is whether refrigerants are technically proven. TEEP reviewed and reconstructed the tables from the September 2022 report for RACHP applications and presents the next few slides the status of some alternatives for HFCs relevant to Group 2 parties. In the new tables, we list the applications for each category of products and addressing the alternatives that are technically proven and globally available, then listing the accessibility of Group 2 parties to those alternatives in the third column. The third column describes the degree of accessibility in terms of limited use, growing use, or widespread use. TEEP listed the lower GWP alternatives in groups as follows: non-Montreal Protocol controlled substances, including multiple flammability and toxicity classes. These substances have very low to zero GWP and zero ODP and include ammonia, hydrocarbons, CO2, HFOs, and HCFOs. A2L refrigerants, these are Montreal-controlled substances that are mildly or lower flammable A2L. Here, A2L refers to the safety class of the refrigerants as per ASHRAE Standard 34 or ISO 817 and include HFC 32 and various HFC-HFO blends with GWPs between 140 and 1,100. And A1 refrigerant blends, these are Montreal-controlled non-flammable A1 safety class refrigerants with HFC or HFC-HFO blends with GWP that can exceed 1,100. The last group is refrigerants that are currently under considerations, and we use this term to refer to refrigerants that are either under development, testing, or have not been commercialized globally. These are refrigerants not accessible to Group 2 parties, but are listed here for completeness. In these tables, the GWP values are those used in Kigali Amendment of the Montreal Protocol. While we show some examples in the next 4 slides, the remaining tables are in the chapter and in the backup slides. It is important to note that there was not enough commercial information for the working group to do a thorough investigation across different Article 5 parties. Moreover, market information is dynamic as parties are finalizing the implementation of HPMPs and starting the implementation of KIPs. And Group 2 includes 10 varied parties. TEEP, however, tried to verify the information with local industries and experts in those parties. As mentioned in the first column, as mentioned earlier, the first column focus on the application. The second column presents the alternative refrigerants according to the different categories: non-Montreal Protocol substances, A2L refrigerant blends, and A1 blends and refrigerants currently under consideration. And the third column describes the degree of accessibility in terms of limited use, growing use, or widespread use. As an example, for the category of factory-sealed domestic and commercial refrigeration appliances, this table here shows the widespread use of isobutane for domestic refrigerators and freezers in most Group 2 parties, growing use of hydrocarbons for commercial plug-in refrigeration in some Group 2 parties, and little use of heat pump tumble dryers in Group 2 parties. As another example, this table shows growing use of all alternatives in some Group 2 parties for all categories in food retail and food service refrigeration, condensing units, distributed systems, and large central systems. For air-to-air conditioners and heat pumps, we found that there is limited use of propane for small self-contained AC window units in Group 2 parties. For small split air conditioner, there is limited use of hydrocarbons and HFOs, growing use of hydrofluorocarbon 32 and other A2L refrigerants in some Group 2 parties, and various refrigerants that are not yet accessible in Group 2 parties or globally. For larger split and packaged AC equipment, we found that HFOs are accessible in most Group 2 parties, but extent of use is unknown. A2L refrigerants, HFC 32 and R454B, are growing in use in some Group 2 parties, and various refrigerants are currently under considerations and not accessible in Group 2 parties or globally. With that, I'd like to pass the floor to my co-chair, Sueli Carvalho.
Focuses on the status of alternatives in the foam, fire suppression, and medical and chemical sectors. Next. For foam, fire suppression, medical and chemical sectors, the 2022 report findings remain relevant for both G1 and G2 parties. Some updates: in foams, HFC 365 MFC has been reported as no longer commercially available. Production ceased in September 2023. Although there may be some HFC 365 MFC available in supply chains, no reports of new manufacture are known, and this alternative will not be commercially available once stocks are exhausted. In fire suppression, both G1 and G2 parties face the same barriers to the use of lower GWP alternatives. FK 5112 may become affected by proposed PFAS regulations and definitions in the EU and other parties. No significant updates for aerosol, solvents, semiconductor, electronics manufacturing, and magnesium production. For MDIs, global legislation and corporate policies of major pharmaceutical companies may accelerate the introduction of lower GWP pressurized MDIs in Article 5 parties. This could potentially mean lower GWP MDIs are available in Article 5 parties from 2026 onwards. The reduction in use of HFCs in Europe and United States may lead to security of supply and commercial pricing concerns for Article 5 parties, including India. The next section is on information on standards, regulations, and building codes. Standards, regulations, and building codes have been updated since 2016, incorporating learnings from company and industry-sponsored research. As the industry moves from conventional high GWP products toward lower GWP refrigerants, the safety classification of refrigerants are changing. Therefore, equipment and installation standards need to be updated to incorporate those changes. Some examples of equipment and components covered by standards include compressors, commercial refrigeration appliances, heat pumps, AC units, and dehumidifiers, and others shown in this slide. Important to note that several G2 parties participate in the Gulf Cooperation Council Standards Organization, and that some national standards, for instance, ASHRAE 15, have been adopted by G2 parties. Examples of international and regional RAC HP standards and more details can be found in Annex 2 of the report. We are presenting next some information on MLF-funded activities relevant to the G2 parties. Working group co-chairs requested the Multilateral Fund Secretariat to provide information that will enable parties to better understand the current situation of G2 parties with respect to relevant technology conversion activities, mindful that only A5 parties that ratified the Kigali Amendment are eligible to receive financial support from the MLF. Annex 3 of our report provides a number of examples of relevant technology conversion and demonstration projects approved under the MLF. Information is also provided on planned activities for G2 parties, which were included in the MLF Adjusted Consolidated Business Plan for 2024 and 2026. This information is presented in Annex 4, noting that at the time of submission of TIP's 2024 progress report, only India and UAE had ratified the Kigali Amendment, and that UAE does not receive financial assistance from the Multilateral Fund. Bahrain just ratified the Kigali Amendment on July 1st, 2024. The working group also noted that while HFC baseline period for G2 is 2024 to 2026, some parties, such as India, Oman, and Pakistan, have reported HFC consumption as in this table. In conclusion, in accordance with the terms of reference, TIP provided updates to its technical review of alternatives to HFC relative to J2 parties, based on the global technical review presented in its 2022 report. TIP did not attempt to qualify whether alternatives will enable G2 parties to achieve certain reductions in HFC consumption by a certain date, because such an assessment depends on other factors that are not related to the technical and economic criteria TIP was requested to assess. In addition, TIP did not attempt to assess the relative ability of G2 parties to comply with the control measures to phase down HFCs as adopted by the 28th MOP in 2026, which depends on their individual implementation approach. TIP provides its technical review and defers to parties to consider or not any changes to phase down schedule. So TIP's current technical review under paragraph 5 of Decision 28.2 reinforced key messages from its 2022 report, such as development of lower GWP alternatives for most application in all sectors supports HFC phase down globally. Alternatives in all sectors meeting technical criteria are in use by many parties, including G2 parties. Some technically proven alternatives accessible to all parties, including in G2 parties, have some challenges that were identified and which need to be addressed. For most of the criteria investigated, TIP working group did not find any distinguishing factor between G1 and G2 parties. Thank you very much for your attention.
A very informative presentation, and thank
I will thank the TIEP for their reports and for their assessment in this one. I have some general comments and I have some questions, and so I will start about my comment when we talk about technically proven and operationally feasible. Criteria should be used for assessment in country in our regions. The capacity of AC with refrigerant circulating inside different room, as Professor was mentioning, location in order of approximately between 25 to 30 ton refrigeration or more. These equipment need to be energy efficient, and this is not being covered in your reports. What is the effect of alternative against their energy? Because even if we want to transfer to this alternative, the energy side is something also a ban from our side to use this alternative, which is not being discussed here, and achieve the desirable cooling effects. This is very obvious. We need a clarity on whether these options are prevalent in today's context, because you are already talking about refrigerant, not the equipment and technology and energy related to that one. Large capacity systems are used in household. We are using large capacity in hot ambient. We are not using small because areas of cooling is very big. 32 is feasible for small capacities, as is mentioned in the report of TIEP previously, that cannot be used as big equipment, and it's not highly recommended to be used, especially for the limitation of charge. It's posed the safety challenges, and we didn't see that in the report. The second general comment is on use of low GWB. We do note that retrofit of residential and commercial is a challenging. Availability of these products suitable to our condition is not available, and you can check these issues. I think the parties have to understand, as a member of the EXCOM for a long time, and especially after reviewing 45 KIPs, approving this 45 KIPs, a lot of these skips with the implementing agency mentioning lack of alternative technologies. Where your report mentioned it's feasible. So there is something in conclusion, I don't understand how to express it. So there is a mislanguages between technically questions and technically review. Is the implementing agency correct or is the TIAB assessment correct? I think both entities have to sit together and discuss this one, because yesterday, day before, I listened to a meeting with MLF, all the implementing agency mentioning the lack of alternative to be discussed in the KIB. And now I see a very highly and shiny things that TIAB says that everything, and there is no distinguish between Group 1 and Group 2 with this flammability and energy efficient equipment to be approved. Safety and training, this is critical. We have mobile service technical, as you know, in our country, especially in GCC, supporting servicing and maintenance for this rock equipment. If this not fully addressed, both technically, assistant training and regulation technology adoption will not be operation feasible. Why? Because we don't have this equipment, so we start training on what? If you don't have a market penetration fully, then the training for in-local, it will be not desirable, because the supplier of this equipment, under his guarantee, he will train only his people. He cannot train the other one to engage within this one. So this is also a binding for us. Heat experience by countries is today contact is much higher. When we discuss in 2016 from 2013 about Kigali, the hot ambient temperature country was a certain era. In today's era, you are seeing that, I think, as I mentioned it yesterday, categorizing hot countries need carefully to be revisited. This implies that more countries could be facing accessibility of operational feasible technologies. There is a lot of countries now using air conditioning when they will never using air conditioning previously. So I think this is have to be very carefully drawing conclusion on availability of technology. Is issue of exemption will be increasing when we are mentioning this issue. The second thing, I was looking to the tables that for food retails and what is you do, this is a good issue for us to understand. But one question from my side, that for the small split AC, less than 12 kilo, you mentioned non-Montreal Protocol controlled substance, which is in presentation page number 19. You mentioned HFC is 127, and this is propylene. And I never hear that this is used for a small split unit. It's used for industrial refrigeration. So I need a clarification about this one. I never seen any mini split or any suppliers that mentioning 127, so how we reached and land to that exercise. Other thing that in all the report, all this availability, all these challenges, I didn't hear from you in your report one line about PFAS. Group 2 will never face this PFAS regulation. They will not affect, there is no distinguish between Group 2 and Group 1 about this element. This is not something will limit our access to that one if this regulation was adopted. So I think you carefully didn't engage the PFAS issues to this selection of alternatives and selection of this one. One of the statements that mentioned in the report mentioned that the best things to give a chance to penetrate the market is to discourage importation, but you didn't mention discouraging exportation from supplying country from article from non-A5 parties. And this is a good statement from your side that you put the burden of us. If you go to the regulation of EU, they have a limitation for exportation, for refrigeration, is beyond 1,100, which is only consists that EU can export for Article 5 countries 404 and above 1,000, and this is not mentioned. And this is one of the limitations that we cannot do. One of explanation I need to understand, because you mentioned about harmonized MIPS and the testing. I think the only country in the Group 2 who have a different testing temperature is Kuwait. We are testing under 48, which T4. So how that can affect the penetration in the group 2 for this alternative and technology. If you little bit, Dr. Umar emphasized on this one, the last comment of mine is that you mentioned that have taken all these above criteria into consideration group 2 parties. The only distinguished criterion for accessibility in group 2 parties is whether refrigerant are technically proven. Who will prove that that refrigerant is proven and how that will affect? Because this statement, it's not clear for me. I don't understand what you mean about this one. I think it's a good issue, but in normal reading, I don't understand, because usually there's no technology can be accepted if the refrigerant is not proven. So what the statement here from your side about this one? And I stop here, and thank you very much. 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 And thank you very much.
Some questions. I will take up some more delegations who asked for the floor. India, and please indicate if you would like to ask questions to TEEP now. So, but first, India.
Bring out the technology review and providing the information on alternatives to the controlled substances in various sectors and subsectors in 2024 TEEP progress report and for the presentation. As proposed by the co-chair, we would like to seek some clarification from the TEEP and later on make our detailed intervention on this issue. TEEP has indicated limited accessibility to alternative for some Article 5 parties. If further said that for some applications, alternatives with GWP of up to 750 can quickly be adopted. Can the TEEP clarify on adoption of such alternatives in systems with high charge quantity and in high ambient condition? Secondly, what could be the reasons for the low penetration of the low or lower GWP alternatives in large air conditioning systems? Thirdly, it has been stated that some applications are still reliant on high GWP refrigerants like transport and low temperature systems, etc. What are the likely low or lower GWP alternatives in these sectors and adoption capability in countries, particularly in high ambient conditions? Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Here.
With your questions to TEEP. The next one on my list is Saudi Arabia, and then I have Canada and Bahrain. And I just wanted to clarify, are there others who would like to ask questions? Otherwise, I close the list. I don't see anybody else. Then Saudi Arabia has the floor. So I close the list with Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Bahrain. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
Once again, I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity. We have a number of remarks on the TEEP report. The KSA delegation thanks TEEP and all the TOCs for the progress report that is a part of the upcoming 2027 report. However, this report did not contain or did not refer to the high ambient temperature countries in its section 3 and did not refer to the high temperature that is one of the problems faced by Article 5 countries, especially in terms of the utilization of refrigeration and air conditioners. This high temperature has an impact on the efficiency on air conditioners and refrigerant gases used. The report did not refer to alternatives that the report has endeavored to focus on its viability. It did not take into consideration the high ambient temperature and also the flammability aspect.
تحت تلك المادة النظامية بما في ذلك الدول الحارة ومنها دول مجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربي على الرغم من تأكيد التقرير على أن المواد ذات معدلات الاحترار العالمي المنخفضة أكثر قابلية للاشتعال بمعنى أنه كلما انخفض معدل الاحترار العالمي للمادة أي الغاز غاز التبريد كلما كانت تلك المادة أكثر قابلية للاشتعال تناقض في التقرير لافت للنظر كما أن التقرير لم يأخذ في حسبانه كذلك سمية بعض تلك المدائن التي يدعو لها ومدى خطورتها على صحة بل وحياة البشر وملائمتها للأجواء الحارة واكتفى فقط بدعوة الدول الأطراف إلى الالتزام بالبروتوكول وتعديل كيغالي آخر تعديلات البروتوكول علما بأن استقراء هذا التقرير المرحلي 24 يظهر أن التقرير اعتمد على دراسات مكتبية وبني على احتمالات ظنية فقط ولم تعتمد تحليلاته وتوصياته على أي دراسة بحثية تطبيقية ولم يأخذ في الحسبان جميع العوامل المؤثرة سلبا أو إيجابا على غازات التبريد وبدائلها التي يوصي بها تكرارا ومرارا ليخرج بتحليلات موثوقة تؤكد مصداقية توصياته وكأنما التقرير ما هو إلا إعادة صياغة فقط لتقارير اللجان الفرعية التي استقى التقرير منها مادته الأدبية فلم تدرس تلك البدائل في الأجواء الحارة أو الرطبة أو الجافة أو الباردة أو غيرها من الظروف والأجواء الخارجية المحيطة بأجهزة وغازات التبريد الافتراضية أو الواقعية والأحمال الكهربائية المولدة لأجواء حارة حول أجهزة التبريد في المنشآت المختلفة السكنية أو التجارية أو المكتبية أو التعليمية أو المستشفيات وغيرها ومدى تأثيرها على كفاءة التبريد والطاقة معا لتلك البدائل والتقنيات المستهدفة بالتقرير وتعديل البروتوكول بل لم يأخذ التقرير مع الأسف في الحسبان أن الدول ذات الطقس الحار تبلغ درجة حرارة صيفها ما يزيد عن 50 درجة مئوية مما يعني أن تلك الدول أكثر دول العالم حاجة للتبريد والتكييف في جميع مناحي حياتها بجميع أفراد شعوبها في بناياتها السكنية والوظيفية والتجارية والصناعية على حد سواء بل في وسائط نقلها البرية والجوية والبحرية ما يستوجب بالضرورة عدم إلزامها باستخدام بدائل غير مناسبة لظروفها المناخية والحياتية بل والصحية والبيئية والاجتماعية فتخيل هنا وسأتحدث هنا بلسان رجل الشارع العامي وليس أنا متخصصا فتخيل فضلا أنني أقود سيارة عرضة للاشتعال بل قد تنفجر في أي لحظة لما يحتويه مكيفها من غاز قابل للاشتعال أترقب اشتعالها أو انفجارها في أي لحظة لمجرد أنني التزمت ببروتوكول وتعديله لم يراعي إنسانيتي وحاجتي الماسة للتكييف والتبريد في ظل ظروف مناخية قاسية في منطقة ليست اختياري بل وجدت فيها وعلى ذلك فقس مما يستوجب فضلا لا أمرا تضافر الجهود من أمانة البروتوكول والدول المتقدمة معا والتيب أن تمنح تلك الدول ذات المناخ الحار والتي منها دولتي العزيزة وخليجي الغالي استثناء طويل الأجل لحين وجود بدائل مبنية على شواهد وأدلة علمية موثوقة مناسبة لظروفها الحياتية والمناخية فتلك الدول ومنها دول الخليج العربي التزمت مع دول العالم قاطبة بالبروتوكول وتعديلاته بل وصادق من صادق منها عليه ولم يأبه ذلك البروتوكول وتعديلاته أسفا بتلك الدول وظروفها المناخية والحياتية معا بل يلمح لها بالمادة السابعة عدم الالتزام ويخوفها بها ليلزمها ببدائل تناسب غيرها مناخيا واقتصاديا مستغلا أن غالبية تلك الدول حارة المناخ غير منتجة لغازات التبريد وبدائلها وإنما مستهلكة لها ومما يستوجب بالضرورة كذلك إتاحة الفرصة للدول المنتجة لغازات التبريد HFCs المستهدفة بالبروتوكول وتعديلاته المناسبة لظروف الدول حارة المناخ ومنها خليجنا الغالي أن تبقي على خطوط إنتاج لتلك الغازات تؤمن للدول ذات الطقس الحار احتياجاتها من غازات التبريد والتكييف الHFCs من جهة وتحميها من تولد سوق سوداء لتلك الغازات تستغل احتياجها من غازات التبريد والتكييف الHFCs من جهة وتحميها من تولد سوق سوداء لتلك الغازات تستغل احتياجاتها بأسعار باهظة تثقل كاهلها اقتصاديا لحين وجود بدائل مناسبة لأجوائها الحارة فتلزم بنص المادة السابعة من البروتوكول وجوبا دون استثناء بعكس يعكس أروع مثال يحتذى لدول العالم قاطبة في الالتزام ببروتوكول مونتريال وتعديلاته هذا ما وددت المشاركة به الوفد السعودي والذي أرجو أن يؤخذ في الحسبان من قبل أمانة البروتوكول فضلا والمؤتمر معا ولجنة التقييم التقني والاقتصادي التيب في تقاريرها المرحلية والنهائية القادمة خاصة المنظور منها تقرير 27 والذي قد تبنى عليه قرارات تتوافق على إقرارها والالتزام بها نتوافق على إقرارها والالتزام بها آخذة في الحسبان ظروف جميع الدول الأطراف بلا استثناء ومنها دول الخليج العربي غالية المكانة في قلبي شاكرا تعاون الجميع وتقبلوا تحياتي وتقديري الوفد السعودي
floor and then Bahrain. And then, Teep, you have a long list of questions to answer, so take good note. So Canada, please.
Well, we'd like first to thank the TEEP for its report. We thought initially, essentially, we thought that it met the requirements of paragraph 5 of decision 28.2. However, we are hearing some of the concerns and ideas for additional factors that would need to be taken into account. So we're just noting these concerns that perhaps a more detailed assessment was envisaged. I think perhaps the expectation from the TEEP was perhaps different based on the actual decision that was taken. So, in any case, we wanted first to also congratulate Bahrain for the ratification of the Kigali Amendment. Being the third, I think, G2 country to have ratified, and we noticed that they ratified on July 1st. On Canada Day, so I think this was just a present that Hassan wanted to give to Canada, so thank you very much. We had just a few questions regarding the information in the air conditioning sector. Some of the alternatives that are put there, we were wondering to what extent it was comprehensive. So for small self-contained air conditioning window units, the only alternatives that is listed is HC290. So we just wanted to know, is that because the TEEP felt this is the only alternative available on the market, or is this the main one? possibly are there others that are not mentioned here. Similarly, for larger split and package AC, the only alternatives are HFO 1234YF and 1234ZEE. We're wondering if there were others that are either available or being considered for these applications. We imagine that these are important applications in Group 2 countries, particularly countries with high ambient temperature conditions, and that currently there's limited or unknown use of these alternatives in these countries. We also wanted to know if the TEEP had any more information on the capacity of equipment to address high temperature conditions. I mean, I remember we started talking about the HAT issue quite a number of years ago, and we think that the observation that cooling equipment degrades in terms of its efficiency and cooling capacity with very high temperature. We've been aware of that for quite some time, and the need to compensate the cooling capacity by having larger sized equipment is something that was also discussed in previous TEEP report. We were just wondering, over the past 10 years since we started discussing this issue, do you have an idea to what extent there has been progress in terms of addressing cooling in high ambient temperature conditions without having a significant penalty on cooling capacity or energy efficiency? You know what I mean? It's like, has there been a change perhaps in the temperature level up to which you could have cooling without necessarily incurring a significant penalty on the capacity or energy efficiency? So just wondering if there has been progress over the past 10 years on this particular issue. Mr. Co-Chair, we may have a few comments, but I think your guidance was just for questions on the stage, but we did hear that there were comments that were being made, so we're kind of just wondering if we should provide our comments now or maybe just wait until after the questions.
Would be to wait after the questions, so
Okay.
I know then that you come back, so...
Possibly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bahrain, please. 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 Bahrain, please.
Chair, thank you to the TEEP
على هذا التقرير
for this report.
ولن أعلق على
I will
التقرير
not
سأترك
comment on the report itself,
كما طلبت سيد الرئيس
but I will
لوقت لاحق
keep my comments
ولكني
for later
سأكتفي
as
ببعض
requested, but
الإثارات
perhaps I will just
التي
raise
لفتت
some
انتباهي
questions, things
خلال
that
قراءتي
drew my
لهذا التقرير.
attention as I read the report.
وفي الحقيقة أنا ليس لدي أي شك بأن الفريق المقدر المحترم هو ليس لديه نية مسبقة عند إعداد التقرير، إنما هو يحاول أن يعكس واقع معين موجود ويخدم هذه البلدان، إلا أنني أعتقد أنه لم أستطع أن يعني أستوعب بعض الأمور لإثبات هذا الأمر الذي أنا أساسا مقتنع به من قبلهم. فعلى سبيل الافتراض يعني لعل أول استفسار يخطر في بالي ما هي الأسس التي اعتمد عليها الفريق في إثبات الجوانب الإحصائية المرتبطة بتوفر المعدات والأجهزة في بلدان العشر المعنية أو في المجموعة الثانية، خصوصا أن هذه البلدان هي بلدان ذات درجات حرارة عالية، وأجد من خلال بعض المصطلحات المستخدمة في التقرير على سبيل الافتراض يتحدث عن توافر البدائل ذات درجات حرارة منخفضة لو GWP على سبيل الافتراض، ويتكلم أنها متوفرة أو في معظم التطبيقات، استخدم كلمة معظم most applications على سبيل الافتراض، ولكن لم يعكس ذلك كيف هي في معظم التطبيقات. هذا مصطلح محير بالنسبة إلي. في جانب آخر على سبيل الافتراض يتحدث أيضا أن هذه التقنيات هي متطابقة ومتوافرة مع أو هذه على سبيل الافتراض أن بعض وسائط التبريد refrigerant ذات الطبيعة المنخفضة low GWB أيضا هي متناغمة مع التطبيقات في قطاع التكييف والتبريد. أيضا يتكلم بشكل عام دون أن يحدد في التقرير مدى التناغم الموجود، وأنا أتكلم هنا عن التنفيذ العملي الواقعي. هو هذا الأمر المحير بالنسبة لي. أحاول أن أربط الكلمات المعلومات المتوفرة في التقرير مع الواقع الذي أعيشه أمام عيني. في الجدول على سبيل الافتراض 8.4 عفوا 8.1 يتحدث في جزئية واسعة جدا عن مجموعة من التطبيقات small split, non-duct split, ducted split. أنا أقرأهم باللغة الإنجليزية لتفادي الترجمة أو للتدقيق على المعاني التي أريد أن أصل لها. package ducted هذه عدد مختلف متنوع ذو حجم متنوع وكبير بين الصغير والمتوسط والكبير، ووضع لها مجموعة من الوسائط في تطبيقات مختلفة على سبيل الافتراض وسيط 32 ولم يحدد في أي تطبيق من هذه التطبيقات تستخدم هذه في بلدان العشرة بنفس أنها متاحة ومتمكن وجودها بنفس الكمية، بحيث القارئ للتقرير يستوعب أنها متوفرة متاحة إمكان الرجوع إليها واستخدامها، في حين هذا ليس هو الواقع. ليس هو الواقع. وهنا يعني قد أشار زميلي من دولة الكويت الشقيقة بأن حجم المكيفات المستخدمة في بعض التطبيقات خصوصا في بلداننا مختلف تماما عن المتوفر في تطبيقات صغيرة ومحدودة تعد ب2 إلى 3 طن، في حين أن الغالب في الاستخدام قد يكون من 5 إلى 6 إلى 7 طن وأكثر في البيوت العادية. وبالتالي هذا لم ينعكس في التقرير، بل أن الإشارات الموحاة في التقرير تشير مثل ما أوضحت منذ قليل أنها متوفرة، وهذا أمر غريب نوعا ما. أحب فقط أن أستفهم من الفريق على أي أساس بنيت هذه المعلومات وهذه الإتاحات العامة، ومن ثم سأدخل لاحقا في المداخلات لأعلق على التقرير. شكرا سيد رئيس. 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 شكرا سيد رئيس.
But I hope Teeb is not exhausted because there are several questions. So please, Teeb, can you start giving the answers? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think you will have to bear with us because some of the questions were repeated from some of the delegates. We'll try to be specific as much as we can, but the answers will not be in any specific order. For the distinguished delegate from India, in terms of the limited accessibility for some Article 5 parties, for some applications, that is based on the information that we were able to gather. And again, in response to the distinguished delegate from Bahrain, I made a very clear statement. It is important to note that there was not enough time and commercial information available to the working group. So the way we collected the information was based on information from the local industries and experts that we collected. So basically, we reached out to experts in the respective parties and also information available to us from the local industries. In terms of the low adoption of alternative to air conditioning in some Article 5 parties, I think it depends on like we have mentioned that in other reports, and we were not asked to talk about the adoption, the limited adoption limitation. What we want to ensure and mention here is that the technology is technically feasible. So whether is it propane for small mini splits in air conditioning or R32 or HFC 32 in larger applications, the technology is technically feasible and available in all markets. In terms of transport and low temperature applications, the alternatives for Group 2 parties, transport refrigeration, the alternatives for Group 2 parties are similar to alternatives for global market because this is a global commodity. You want to make sure that the alternative used in one market is used in other markets because the transport refrigeration industry is a global industry. So it is R452A, although there is other lower GWP alternatives being worked on for the lower for low temperature vaccine refrigeration or low temperature refrigeration. The list, I don't remember the list exactly on the top of my head, but we had the vaccine cold chain report about 2 years ago, and the list was comprehensive there.
Discuss what we were trying to do in this report, in this particular report about paragraph 5. We're trying to find the commonalities between the G2 countries that distinguish them from the other countries in Article 5. I would like to remind here also that there are other HAT countries, I think 35 in total, that are part of G2, and we are cognizant that also they face the same challenges. We try to include the challenges that are faced in the HAT countries regarding the application of the technology, concerning the size of the equipment, the energy efficiency, the challenges in services, and some other challenges as well. And we have found that these challenges also apply, as we said, to the other parties in the Group 1 countries. And that's why we did not find this distinguishing factor over there. So we were trying to find out regarding the description of the terms, the growing use or the widespread use. There is a certain dynamism in the markets. The markets are changing all the time. And we, of course, we were dealing with 10 Group 2 countries that have different characteristics and different stages of acceptance of some of the technologies, particularly, for instance, let's say the use of HFC 32 in India for some of the air conditioning equipment. So that's why we were careful in categorizing the use, knowing that we did not have access to complete market data to be able to present that within the report. And I think this, we mentioned, that's why we used those terms to indicate whether there is accessibility to it or not. I'd just like to remind here that when we talk about availability and accessibility, we talk about the availability of the technology on a global basis, while accessibility is addressed on an individual basis, and it's the accessibility of the party to the technology. I will stop here and confer with my colleagues on the other parts, 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 on the other parts.
Okay, the first question about the specific options or alternatives that were not listed in our categories. In fact, what we did is when the market has already moved to a certain alternative, we prefer to just not list too many alternatives and focus on that one, like the case with small self-contained air conditioning equipment. So the market has already moved to propane as the refrigerant of choice, and we didn't just want to list any other alternative. And these are typically very small units. So it is moving from R410A to propane as the refrigerant of choice. The more comprehensive list was available in the R2022 and the 2022 report, but this is a refined list for focusing on Group 2 need. In terms of high ambient temperature countries and the capacity degradation actually with R410A is more or less worse than most other alternatives, and R410A is being adopted at scale in most high ambient temperature countries. So if R410A is being adopted, moving to something like HFC 32 or R454B, we expect energy efficiency to be improved, not a penalty on efficiency. So a better efficiency, not a penalty on efficiency. I hope that answers the question. For the distinguished delegate from Kuwait, I'll try to go through the questions in order. You're trying to give us a big list here. In terms of technically proven, basically the technology exists. The technology works in high ambient temperatures. The technology works in Group 2. So Group 2 is not necessarily high ambient. Group 2 is high ambient, but also includes other parties, India, that is not high ambient temperature. Although we acknowledge that in India, some parts of India is high ambient temperatures. So technically proven is the technology exists in or can work in group 2 parties or not. And we have from the GSO, my colleague here just showed me that less than 5 ton, there are equipment working with alternative refrigerants already, including lower GWP, working in the market. You mentioned that you need larger capacity systems to operate in residential units, and while this is challenging, and we mentioned that during the presentation, the new IEC 6335-2-40 and the ISO 5149 allow for larger refrigerant charges, especially for A2L refrigerant, because now we know how to handle A2L refrigerant. So when A2L refrigerants were first introduced to the market, we were very alarmed. Oh, this is flammable. We don't know how to handle them. But now we are getting more and more experience on how to handle them, how to design systems to better contain them, and to make sure that the system is safe for operation. So you can easily put a 10-ton in a decent size residential application. In terms of KIPS and lack of technology, I think the challenge here is the implementing agencies are always looking for something that is not the typical mainstream. There has been this leapfrogging concept that they were always pushing for. But if you were to just want to do conversion from HFC to lower GWP alternative, the option is there, and you can start right away. Safety and training, we have mentioned that during the slide. It was mentioned on slide number 14. It was the fifth bullet, and we mentioned 2 examples, one in India and one in high ambient temperature party. While we acknowledge that heat is higher than typically acknowledged in other parties, especially in high ambient temperature countries or parties, the HFC industry or the RACHP industry was able to design R410A equipment to operate in HAT when previously it was thought impossible. So 10 years ago, it was thought that R410A equipment cannot operate in high ambient temperature parties. And now you can find R410A equipment in high ambient temperature parties. So we need to acknowledge that it's not an impediment. High ambient temperature, if you design properly, if you do the right optimization, do the proper selection, you can operate properly in high ambient temperatures. When you talked about PFAS issues apply equally to Group 1 and Group 2. So we did not include that as part of our assessment because it applies equally and was not part of our discussion here. We acknowledge that in the TEEP progress report. I hope that answers your questions. That's it.
Regarding flammable refrigerants for mobile air conditioning, we note that low GWP refrigerant, a 2L refrigerant, has been introduced globally by most of the global automotive makers from about 2012 and 100% from 2017 in light-duty vehicles. We have noticed that there is no issue or concern with using this 2L refrigerant and do not find a technical reason why it couldn't be used globally.
Questions raised by a number of parties about the information and the expectations for this one-time assessment requested of TEEP to do a technical review for specific to G2 parties, so parties can consider any potential changes to the schedule. I would note, in terms of the general information that we provided, it was as a result of our sort of experts around the world and familiar with sort of the situation and some G2 parties as the phase-on has transitioned. I would also note that since 2016, Group 2 parties have not done anything. They've actually been quite active, as we noted, by parties here as well as in our report. They've moved forward in terms of their MEPs and standards. They've tested and are operational in terms of some of the equipment adoption. So, I mean, these experiences are very helpful, and I would note to parties that we are noting as sort of the TEEP, the experiences of not just G2, but all Article 5 parties in terms of their phase-down transitions and challenges. Under Decision 28.2, parties requested regular updates on alternatives to HFCs, regular periodic updates by the TEEP every 5 years to consider these factors and any emerging issues. And we note that. And so there's an opportunity within sort of TEEP's, the requested every 5-year report under the Decision 28.2. There's also the quadrennial assessment report, and there's also the sort of standard progress report for TEEP to sort of consider these challenges that continue for parties during the phase down. Thank you.
Answers and on the questions, so I think you can go back to your seats. And now I would like to ask, let's say, general comments and also ideas on ways forward. And parties that already expressed, let's say, their general comments during the questions. If you come back, be brief, but let's say there were already some comments made during the question and answer session. I really would like to ask everybody who is going to speak to indicate this very quickly, because we really would like to speed up. So I have India, Kuwait and Bahrain on my list. And please, if you would like to speak, let it know, and let's say then I would like also to close the list. But first, India.
The TEEP provides update on alternatives in various sectors and subsectors in its annual progress report. The SET technology review in specific to paragraph 5 of decision 28/2 of the MOF 28, focusing on technical feasibility, economic viability, commercial availability, environmentally sound, safe to use, easy to service and maintain the equipment containing the controlled substances, the potential limitation of their use, and their implications for different sectors and subsectors. While low or lower global warming potential technologies are evolving And with rise in global temperatures, countries face unique challenges in adopting these technologies, particularly in larger capacity air conditioning systems, including for household uses. Several countries have been experiencing unprecedented heat waves and significant rise in summer temperatures. This necessitates a revisit of elements defining high ambient temperature countries decided during 2016 as a part of Kigali Amendment. High ambient conditions also result in excessive loads on the operations of the air conditioning systems, especially when they need to be operated for larger duration to cater to the cooling needs. This may also have technology as well as the design implications for countries. Mr. Co-Chair, sustainability of low or lower GWP options presents an overarching challenge which has been highlighted in different parts of the report. Having said so, it is important to also examine the concerns relating to PFAS and implications of these various sectors and subsectors. In recent years, it has been challenging in several countries, including our region, in terms of rising temperature and availability of alternatives, cooling technologies, and its effectiveness in terms of cooling efficiency, accessibility, and affordability of sustainable technologies. Further, carbon emissions from HFC refrigerants and their potential contributions to climate change continue to be critical consideration. With the industry having carried out multiple transitions under the Montreal Protocol, the transitions from HFCs is becoming a difficult proposition for this industry. While countries are making all possible efforts in this direction, there is a need for a long-term sustainable approach for transition of the HVAC industry. Considering the challenges being faced by the countries, it is recommended that some more time be given to address these issues linked with availability, affordability, and reliable sustainable technologies. Mr. Co-Chair, in light of the above, TEEP updates become very relevant for parties to have realistic appreciation of issue, and it is highly important that the TEEP continues to provide updates on the low or lower GWP alternatives, considering the challenge as well as the region-wise distinguishing factors, including for Group 2, Article 5 parties on various criteria mentioned in the paragraph 5 of the said decision 28/2 till 2027. Considering the freeze of 2028 of Article 5, Group 2 parties, a draft decision on this by like-minded parties would enable TEEP to continue its work in this direction. Accordingly, we propose further discussion on this important issue in a contact group. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
The decision, are you already going to present it now, or you would like to present it later, the CRP?
We are in the consultation process. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. 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 Co-Chair.
I have on my list further Kuwait, Bahrain, EU, and the US. And I don't see any others who would like to take the floor, so I would like to close the list. So first, Kuwait.
Answering my questions, I think that as a general comment that it's a little bit of contradictions between their answers. What I listen carefully and I take my notes. When I talk about the implementing agencies, they indicate that they have another way and we didn't look to the skips because for the technology. But it's the same time in the same report, TEEP indicate the energy efficiency project. So why it was not the same issue that this is just a proven project not been working, but you take it as something to put it in the report, but you didn't indicate anything related to the KIBS. So I just want to highlight this one, that sometimes you indicate, sometimes you don't indicate. It depends on the mood of the TIEB who's writing that chapter. So I just want to clarify that one, that KIBS was designed also from the same entity, from the same agencies, but you rely on this project. But for the KIBS, you don't want to rely, because this is a formality of how implementing agency adopt technologies. I think that TIEB mentioned that 410A degradation is very high, but if we want to go to another alternative, it's feasible and it can work. Before 10 years, this is what not feasible to do, but now it's feasible to do. I think in your report, you didn't mention what you are stating now. So could you give us light and indicate and more information about how these been developed and how this technology developed? And I think as a GCC country, we are 6 of the 10 countries, and I already discussed with the most prominent supplier here in this room in 2 days, and the maximum capacities that they can supply for high ambient temperature country with a specific limitation was 6 tons, and the TIEB professor mentioning 10 tons for the hot ambient temperature countries, and this need to be investigated more. I think that this report has to be updated, and also, as the distinguished delegate from Bahrain was mentioning in his question, we want to understand when you say there is a growing accessibility, what is the percentage at least, not the numbers. We want to understand which percentage, 1%, 2%, 3% in group 2 against group 1, because this will highlight how we want to move. And as Inzia mentioned, that we will freeze very soon, so we need to adopt this technology. I think the report needs to be more advanced, more reliable, and they mentioned directly because of the short of the time they couldn't do that and they couldn't investigate. And I think that in a way we have to look to the consultation that TIEB do with the expert and what type of expert that consultation happen, because we wish to also, as a country, I am very open to have that expert to work for me, because he has so much knowledge more than a lot of the implementing agency experts. So I need to understand these experts so I can discuss with them, because they have solutions that we are not access to these solutions. And I will raise my voice also with my colleague in India that we need to have a contact group to discuss a lot of these terminology that it's being used and how we will access to this one. Thank you very much. One, 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 thank you very much.
Thank you,
أيضا
Co-Chair.
الشكر إلى فريق
I would
التياب.
like also to thank the
أعتقد
chief
بأن
for their
هذا
answers and
التقرير
report. In
لم
our
يكن
opinion,
موفقا
this
في إيصال
report
رسائل
is not
حقيقية تعكس
quite
الواقع
successful
الذي تعيشه
in tackling
بلدان المجموعة
realistic,
الثانية،
issues
وخصوصا
that are faced
البلدان
by
ذات درجات
group
الحرارة
two
الأعلى
parties,
في هذه
especially
المجموعة.
HAP
وكلنا نتذكر عند مناقشة كيغالي عندما تم مناقشة أن تكون هناك مجموعة إضافية، مجموعة ثانية، أن تأتي متأخرة. الأسباب الرئيسية والواضحة والحقيقية وراء هذا إنشاء هذه المجموعة هي عدم توفر تكنولوجيات من ذلك الوقت وإتاحة فرصة أكبر لتبني تكنولوجيات أو توافر تكنولوجيات مستقبلا للنظر فيها. فلا يوجد من الأساس رفض من هذه البلدان عند وجود أو أي تكنولوجيات حقيقية لتبنيها. نحن على استعداد لتبني تكنولوجيات إذا كانت متوفرة، وهذا ما حصل خلال كل العقود السابقة التي مرت على بروتوكول مونتريال. الفكرة عندما أقدم تقرير لهذا التقرير آثار مستقبلية على حقيقة عصب حياة المنتج التبريدي في هذه البلدان، لابد أن أتحرى الدقة عندما أعطي نتائج، ولا أكتفي بالقول أنها مبنية على قول الخبراء والصناعيين بشكل مطلق. أنا أتكلم عن إحصائيات، أتكلم عن واقع موجود. لماذا لا يؤخذ عند تبني أي أرقام أو أي جداول أو أي تقنيات لا تؤخذ الخبرات المحددة في هذه البلدان تحديدا. أين توفر هذه التكنولوجيات في هذه البلدان إذا كانت متاحة وممكنة؟ لماذا لم يتم توفرها لحد الآن؟ على سبيل الافتراض عندما رحنا يعني عندما انتقلنا في بعض القطاعات على سبيل المثال قطاع التبريد قبل 10 أو 12 سنة الآن عند توفر تكنولوجيات مناسبة HFC أو الهيدروكربون 600A لم تقف أي من هذه البلدان ضد هذه التكنولوجيا، بل دخلت بكل انسيابية في الأسواق وحققت نجاحا جيدا وبارزا لهذا اليوم. ليس هناك قصد ضد أي تقنية موجودة إذا كانت مناسبة وكفؤة وتؤدي الغرض منها. عندما نتكلم عن قطاع التكييف قلناها لمئات المرات، نحن لا نتكلم عن رفاهية، نتكلم عن ضرورة. هذه الضرورة تمثل عصب حياة لقطاعات متنوعة، قطاعات تجارية، سكنية، صناعية إلى آخره. وبالتالي عند ذكر توفر تقنيات وتكنولوجيات لابد أن نكون دقيقين. ما هو المتوفر؟ بأي حجم متوفر؟ كيف إمكانياته المتوفرة من ناحية اقتصادية وكفائية؟ وبالتالي هذه الأمور لابد أن تنعكس بشكل وبصورة واضحة ودقيقة. أعتقد أن هذا التقرير لم يعكس هذه الأمور ولم يعني حتى اقترب من الحقيقة منها. وشكرا سيد الرئيس المشار رئيس 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 المشار
EU. Start with thanking the two Group 2 countries that have ratified the Kigali Amendment in this year, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and we appreciate this. Let me also thank the TIAP for their report, which according to us, provides a detailed technical review of the alternatives relevant for this group. We appreciate TIAP looked at a broad set of criteria to analyze if the Group 2 parties are in another position than other Article 5 parties when it comes to the availability of equipment. TIAP points out that for a number of criteria, such as commercial availability, environment sound, economically viable and cost-effective, safe to use in urban areas with high densities, and is to maintain or service, the situation in the group of two countries does not distinguish itself from other A5 parties. On the issue of technically proven, we understand that the report indeed indicates a number of potential barriers, but which we also understand can be addressed by specific policy initiatives. We notably note here that for the key sectors where there are large users of HFCs, technologies of relevance to achieve a potential phase down have started to penetrate also the G2 markets, as provided for in the detailed information in tables 8.1 to 8.8. As such, there seems to be similar opportunities and challenges as in other A5 parties to achieve the phase-down schedule. We have noted the interventions made by several parties now that have focused on the need for further information in this context. And as such, we will look into any possible CRP provided. Thank you very much.
Please.
Thanks to the TEEP for taking the time to walk through the report and to answer questions on it. There are a number of things in that report that we found intriguing, and in particular, we'll also note one of the key findings the TEEP had was not whether or not there's answers to all questions and alternatives in all uses, but that there isn't a unique factor that they were seeing. We think this is important because countries are taking on their own transitions and in their own ways. In the United States, we recently finalized a rule that addressed over 40 separate uses of HFCs and set GWP limits of 150 or 700 for each of those uses, recognizing that those transitions will happen over a period of time. The implementation dates for those transitions are as early as this coming January 1st, 2025, through as late as January 1st, 2028. The reason why I note this is because those were taken with a view towards meeting our 70% reduction that happens in 2029. We've already met the freeze and the 40% reduction, and we're looking at that. So from our perspective, there's a period of time that we have to look at. We have to be cognizant that countries will make different choices at the different transitions they want to make in that time frame. So we don't necessarily think that this is a unique issue that requires additional specific work by the TEEP in a separate report, though we are interested to see what India and perhaps other countries put forward. We wanted to instead note that there are other requests for the TEEP to provide information to the parties, and that information will be available in a timely way. We have, of course, the progress reports every year, and we have the quadrennial assessment due in 2026 that will look at alternatives across all sectors and provide information in accordance with decisions taken concerning the quadrennial assessment. We also have a separate request under 28.2, Decision 28.2, that calls for a 5-year assessment on alternatives to HFCs, which will be available in 2027. So we have those two reports already coming in. Our question, when we look at whatever is put forward in a draft in a CRP, would be whether or not we need to have something separate, or whether or not the other requests to the TEEP already provide the information that we heard many of our colleagues requesting. And we too are obviously interested in that information, as we are also looking at our own phase down and our own steps that we have to take moving forward. At this point, what we would suggest is that we leave this agenda item open, and that we have an opportunity to see the posted CRP before making a decision as to whether or not this is something that we want to take up in a group, or whether or not it's a discussion that can be held in other ways. So that's our ask, given the busyness of the meeting. The CRPs that are already posted, the groups that have already been formed, we do think it might be better to wait until we see this one posted. Thank you very much.
Last speaker on the list, and let's say the idea forward is indeed to come back as soon as the CRP is posted, and then we can provide a way forward or have a discussion on the way forward. So with that, I would like to hand over to my co-chair Miruza for the next agenda item. There are already quite some groups posted and come together, and we have still some let's say, substantive agenda items to cover. So please try to make your interventions short, concise, and focused to the issue. Thank you.
Item 10. On strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions, including combating illegal trade. At the 35th MOP, the parties adopted Decision 35/12 on further strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions, including measures for combating illegal trade. This followed the discussions that began at OEWG45 last year on the outcomes of the workshop held on 2nd July 2023 on strengthening the effective implementation and enforcement of the Montreal Protocol. In paragraph 1 of Decision 35/12, parties were encouraged to facilitate the exchange of information on best practices to prevent illegal trade of controlled substances. Parties were also asked to inform the Secretariat of practices used by entities attempting unauthorized imports of controlled substances. In paragraph 2 of the decision, the Secretariat was requested to provide, before OEWG46 this meeting, and on an annual basis thereafter, a compilation of information provided by parties pursuant to paragraph 1 of Decision 35/12, as well as Decision 34/8. In accordance with this request, the Secretariat has prepared document 46-4 on information provided by parties on this issue. MOP 35 also agreed to include the matter of strengthening mutual protocol institutions on the agenda of this meeting. With this note, I would like to invite the Secretariat to give a presentation on its document. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Uh, 35/12, the Secretariat prepared this compilation, which builds on the similar note that was prepared for the workshop on institutional strengthening held just before OEWG45 last year. And as you know, the Secretariat sends reminders to all parties to submit on a voluntary basis the cases of illegal trade and controlled substances in response to the decisions that I mentioned on the slide. And since then, since 2022, when the first decision was adopted, the Secretariat has received 713 cases of reported illegal trade by parties, which is available on the online database on our website. And since the last note that we prepared for this decision, for the previous decision, for the workshop, we received additional 154 cases from 8 parties. It's also worth noting that 12 parties, in response to the recent reminder, confirmed that they had no cases of illegal trade to report. So there are about 150 different substances, controlled substances mentioned in these case studies. And most common are HFCs, especially in the recent years, related to the starting control measures under the Kigali Amendment. And if we sum up the amount of all these substances reported, it comes to about 3,000 metric tons, of which these additional new cases that had been added since last year amount to 1,200 metric tons. In terms of methods of illegal trade, most of them relate to the lack of proper documentation, such as registration of importers with competent authorities, lack of licensing, quota, misdeclarations. There are quite few cases in relation to trade of non-refillable cylinders, which relates to the fact that we have many cases from parties that have restrictions on use of these cylinders. In terms of detection methods, the majority, about 70% of cases relate to detected by customs during their inspections, routine and random checks, as well as some cases mentioned investigation and special operations on site in the market, as well as using intelligence techniques and tip-offs from the market players, as well as data monitoring, trying to reconcile the data, look at discrepancies, and identify the reasons behind them. In terms of enforcement measures, there are different steps usually taken, from seizure, which we define as temporary removal from possession, to confiscation, to permanent removal from possession. And in most of the cases, these offenses are treated under the administrative courts, administrative proceedings, while at the same time, there are also cases reported where this is treated as a criminal offense under the criminal laws. And in terms of the actions applied by parties, as noted in these case studies, in these cases, this varies between monetary fines, the orders to re-export back to the country of origin at the expense of the offenders. In terms of disposal methods used for the detained substances, there is overall preference to remove the substances from the domestic market, either through destruction, permanent destruction or exporting these countries back to the country of origin. And this is last slide, just to summarize some notable approaches that we mentioned in these cases, all cases. So it's important to continuously engage with customs, capacity building of customs, provision of technological tools like refrigerant identifiers, as well as helping them to develop risk profiles for such trade. Many cases mention the use of automated monitoring systems, such as e-licensing, that connects different sides of the system, allowing real-time comparison of data, discrepancies, and unauthorized transactions. A party mentioned that the licensing system covers also transit operations, meaning the goods that come into temporary possession at the customs before being re-exported, and that party usually liaises with the country of destination through IPIC procedure before authorizing this operation. IPIC also was mentioned as an effective tool to prevent illegal trade at the outset. Some parties also mentioned the importance of public information transparency to create awareness and deter illegal activities by sharing the details of how the regulation in relation to the Montreal Protocol and Kigali Amendment is implemented, displaying also the licenses and quotas and enforcement penalties. And collaboration also has been noted as very important through the establishment of task force and conducting joint enforcement operations between different authorities involved in the enforcement chain. Thank you.
Work on this paper. We have a CRP posted on this issue, CRP 1 by EU. Therefore, I would now like to turn to EU to introduce this CRP. EU.
We would like to thank the Secretariat for following up on Decision 3512 and the report we just heard. This is focusing on the question of illegal trade and to get a better overview what is going on based on the information provided by the parties. For us, it is important to keep this agenda item and this matter in discussion by the parties and to take a bit step back and take a broader approach, considering the workshop we had held last year and the fruitful discussions at the 45th OEWG, which resulted in a quite comprehensive list of issues that parties deemed worthwhile to address in the future. We should follow up, and that is the reason why we prepared a quite concise CRP, bringing forward some of the items addressed during the workshop and during the issuing discussions during the open-ended working group last year, to engage further and to take additional steps to the steps already taken. And here also the initiative on atmospheric monitoring was taken in this context, but also the decision on illegal trade taken last year. Our CRP addresses 3 points. One, quite a concrete request to the Secretariat, and that is to have a look into the material and guidance on licensing systems, because licensing systems are identified as essential for an effective monitoring and implementation of the Montreal Protocol. There are already a wealth of information on the requirements for licensing systems, but it would be very useful for parties, in particular those currently revisiting their administrative systems in view of applying for KIPs, for instance, to have a consolidated and updated version of guidance that could help parties in an effective implementation of licensing system, which is seen as essential. So that would be really a work to synthesize what is already available, and we have a series of documents which address those, but it would be good to have a concise and easily accessible source for this information. Secondly, and that is a bit that builds on the decision 3512, where we just heard the presentation, the compilation of information obtained from parties. And yes, the Secretariat did draw some conclusions from it, which goes a bit beyond what was in principle requested under last year's decision, which rather focused on the compilation of information. So here we would reiterate the call and to ask the Secretariat really to do some analytical work on the basis of the information obtained, resulting in recommendations for measures parties could take to address illegal trade. So that is that would also include then an analysis of usual pattern of illegal behavior. So that would be useful. You have presented elements of it already this year, but to have it on a solid basis, it may be useful to remind of that. Thirdly, and that is a bit looking into the future, we would ask the Secretariat to organize, prior to the open-ended working group next year, a meeting of experts exchanging and discussing potential measures and needs to revisit the compliance mechanism of the Montreal Protocol. Since its inception of the Montreal Protocol, that was never really revisited, although there were some decisions which asked for a review, but that was already nearly 20 years ago. So we are not proposing a repetition of the workshop, but to go one step further, really to ask experts to meet and to have an exchange on potential discussion on needs and potential options for improving the compliance mechanism, which also includes potentially the working methods of the implementation committee and the way how non-compliance cases could be initiated. That was something which was discussed in the context of the CFC 11 incident, where it was seen as perhaps not ideal that there was not a possibility to have a role for the implementation committee in clarifying the facts, the underlying facts. So here we would really wish to see open exchange, and that could then result in more concrete options for improvement and decisions next year. With that, I would express our interest to discuss this CRP in a contact group already at this meeting to have a meaningful decision for adoption at the meeting of the parties. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And on my list, I have Switzerland, United States, Brazil, Canada, Cameroon, India, and Senegal and Tunisia. And if you would like to take the floor, please indicate it now, because we are also very close to lunchtime. Now I would give the floor to Switzerland. 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 Switzerland.
Parties that have provided information on illegal trade and best practices to prevent it, as well as the Secretariat for compiling this information in a comprehensive way. We would like to briefly reflect on strengthening the Montreal Protocol institution in a more general way. Strengthening institutional processes remains a very important task. The Montreal Protocol will soon be 40 years old, and some processes might need to be updated, improved, or further developed to allow the protocol to keep delivering on its objectives. It is not the first time that we discuss this. We have developed together and discussed already also together good elements, and Switzerland is convinced that we can maintain the momentum and make progress during this meeting already. We therefore thank the European Union for their proposal to further develop our work in this area, and we are very much interested in participating in the discussion. Therefore, we would welcome a contact group on that matter that would allow us to discuss the CRP and to look together for the way forward. Thank you very much. Very much. Very much. Very much. Very much. Very much.
Appreciation to the Secretariat for the work they did to pull together the compilation that they provided. We thought it was very detailed, very useful, and very helpful to us as we were thinking through this issue. We also realized it's the first time that the Secretariat pulled together data, not just on completed cases, but information on practices, and shared that information with the parties. We found that document to help us in our own domestic efforts to ensure that we are combating illegal trade. We also think it is useful as a way forward to help us think about how best we can share information with other parties and perhaps work either through this body or through other bilateral engagement or multilateral engagement to ensure we are effectively preventing illegal trade in HFCs and ODS. With regards to the CRP, that has been put forward by the European Union. There are a number there are a number of paragraphs in there where we can see some potential areas of common ground to move forward and think about a pathway for something that could be put forward as a decision at the meeting in the fall. In particular, licensing systems is an area for which we also agree. There are some lessons learned, and there are some areas for which best practices could be improved. We saw information in the Secretariat's report on this. We've seen information through other meetings this year that indicate that strong licensing systems are essential to ensuring that parties are aware of import, export, production, destruction, other activities in their country. We do think that that is an area where we can find common ground to move forward, and we would like to have a discussion on that. We also think that there are other parts of that decision that would be an interesting place for a discussion. That said, we're not sure if some of the language in that decision seems to predetermine a path forward that we may or may not be ready to make. For example, we could see where it might be useful to have a more open discussion, perhaps a workshop or some other way to bring the parties together to talk about things like compliance mechanisms and other aspects without sort of trying to bring in some sort of outside expertise at this early stage. That said, we're certainly open to a conversation and discussion. We have a few thoughts of our own that we don't see reflected in that CRP, and we'll be thinking about language we could put forward in whatever fora that this co-chair decides is the best way for us to move forward. We'd appreciate making sure there is time, though, allotted for this discussion at the meeting this week, and would appreciate guidance from the Secretariat at what would be the right timeline for that. Thank you.
After that, I will also close the list. So on my list, I have Brazil, Canada, Cameroon, India, Senegal, Tunisia, Guinea, Benin, Lesotho, and Malaysia. With this, I will close the list and would like to give the floor to Brazil.
The Secretariat for their efforts, and also the European Union for posting the CRP. This is an issue that this delegation has been engaged in actively, and we also have contributed to the adoption of Decision 35/12 last year. We look forward to discussing this matter further on a contact group, but overall we would like to understand in relation to paragraph 1 of the CRP whether a guidance document would be the best way forward at this stage, since we also need to take into account our national circumstances. We are very much interested in improving our licenses system, but maybe the approach proposed on paragraph 1 would not be the best one. Maybe we could explore other options. On paragraph 2, given that the Secretariat already prepares a presentation and a document to inform parties, as they have done now, we wanted to understand a little bit more the added value behind this additional reference, and also the recommendations expected from the Secretariat. If the Secretariat is to take a more prescriptive approach, we must make sure that all delegations are comfortable with this. Finally, on paragraph 3, we were curious about the details of this proposed meeting of experts, such as the number of experts involved, the selection or nominations of experts, if any, regional representation, if that will be taken into account, and so forth. We wanted to understand a little bit more the details of this new setting. Overall, we look forward to engaging with delegations in a more informal setting, and we would appreciate having enough time to discuss in this matter in this meeting. Thank you.
For its report and the European Union for submitting the CRP. As we all know, the parties have had many discussions over the past years on the issue of strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions. And these discussions, as rightly pointed by the European Union, have led to decisions that have had that generated useful information for parties and actions, such as we've seen for regional atmospheric monitoring. And we note that in the CRP, that such information that has been discussed in the past is also included once again in this proposal. And we do have a few questions on those, similarly to the distinguished delegate from Brazil. With regards to the guidance document for the establishment of licensing systems, as noted by the European Union, there are a few documents already in existence that provide that information. We understand this information is not necessarily collated in one area. However, we'd be interested in discussing whether or not, the approach to consolidate that information is really the best value added for parties. So that is an area of interest to us. And we recognize the importance of licensing systems as presented in the Secretariat's report. So we'd be really interested in continuing that discussion on that aspect. On the second proposal with regards to the compilation, continuing the compilation of information submitted in response to decision 3512, but with added analysis from the Secretariat, this is an area where we'd like to discuss further as well to ensure that information that would be included in a potential decision would be clear and would guide the Secretariat for the type of analysis information that would be beneficial for parties. And finally, with regards to the request to convene a meeting of experts, we don't object to this idea. We think there is merit in discussing the compliance mechanism itself. However, the way the CRP is currently portrayed, raises a number of questions for us in terms of, what is an expert? How do we define who are the experts? Whether or not a meeting ahead of the next OEWG is the best venue for that. Could that be taken up in a contact group? Could work be done intersessionally with online sessions to minimize budgetary implications? So those are a number of things that we'd like to discuss and explore. And we would like to continue the discussion and are supportive of having a discussion at this meeting when possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Delegates, we would really request to be very brief so that I could finish this agenda item before lunch. Thank you. And I give the floor to Cameron.
The presentation made so far by the Secretary for us to understand exactly what this is, the need for this this paper. I want to say that concerning the information on the way of dealing with illegal trade, production, and of illegal trade in controlled substances under the Montreal Protocol, and also identify the potential gaps and the non-compliance procedure challenges that we've actually seen, and also the ideas of how to improve of these challenges that I've listed. We use in support of the CRP presented by EU, and we look forward to work with them, especially in the contact group that will be established. Basically, we want to be looking at preparing the guidance document on the establishment of operational license system, given the fact that we have the Cape, most of the countries are implementing, and it's really vast, and also looking at the relevant sources of identifying options for addressing cases of illegal trade. There are one of the questions, one of the issues remains here, how the third part of it, the composition of experts, how it's going to be, what's the nature, and how we're going to carry on the composition of the expert go to exactly look at this part. Thank you very much, Co-Chair, 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 Co-Chair.
Period for the information on illegal trade in and production and consumption of controlled substances. We would also like to thank the EU for the CRP regarding the proposed guidelines document on the establishment and operation of licensing system. There are national processes, frameworks which have been working quite well. Accordingly, we need a better understanding of the rationale and scope of the proposed guidance document. Secondly, we need more clarity on the proposed Para 2 relating to analysis to be done by the Ozone Secretariat of the annual compilation of information pursuant to Decision 35/12 and of other relevant sources and identifying options for addressing cases of illegal trade. Regarding Para 3, proposing the Ozone Secretariat to convene a meeting of experts, we would like to have more understanding of the modalities for regarding the proposed meeting and associating of proposed experts. We feel Ozone Secretariat can continue to provide updated information to parties and would be happy to discuss further on this issue. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
The floor to Senegal.
We wish
aux autres qui ont déjà félicité l'Union européenne pour mettre en place ce CRPL qui est très important pour nous autres et surtout aussi au secrétariat qui a fait la compilation des données. On se rend compte que dans beaucoup de pays, il y a le système de licence, mais quand même, il y a encore des commerces illicites de substances contrôlées par le protocole de Montréal. Quand on a ces chiffres-là, cela veut dire qu'il y a beaucoup d'autres aussi qui ont échappé parce que les douanes ne peuvent pas tout contrôler, surtout dans nos frontières poreuses de pays. Et c'est pour cela que ce CRP nous intéresse beaucoup et nous souhaiterons participer à tout contre-groupe qui sera mis en place pour décider et donner des lignes directrices plus complètes sur ce commerce illicite. Notre problème, c'est de voir est-ce que le temps qui est demandé n'est pas très juste pour pouvoir faire le workshop et aussi avoir donc des décisions à la prochaine réunion des partis. Donc peut-être l'Union européenne ou le secrétariat pourra nous indiquer les étapes à mettre en place pour que ce temps-là puisse être utilisé sur la proposition de l'Union européenne. Je vous remercie.
شكرا السيد رئيس
Thank
المشاركة.
you, Madam Co-Chair.
وبدورنا نتقدم بشكر
I
الاتحاد
would
الأوروبي
like to
على
thank
إعداد واقتراح هذه الورقة
European
من
Union
أجل
for
تعزيز
this
الجهود الدولية
CRP
للتصدي
so that
للتجارة
we can
غير الشرعية
strengthen the
للمواد المراقبة في
international
بروتوكول مونريال.
efforts
وشكر
to
موصول كذلك
combat
إلى أمانة
illegal
الأوزون على
trade.
حسن
I
إعداد
would
التقرير
like to thank
التأليف.
the Ozone
ونعتقد في
Secretariat
هذا
for
الخصوص
the report.
بأنه
In this
لتفادي التجارة
regard,
غير
in
الشرعية
order
فإنه ينبغي
to
التفضل
combat
كذلك إلى دعوة
illegal
المؤسسات
trade, we
المصدرة
have
للمواد
to call
المراقبة
upon
لبروتوكول مونريال إلى ضرورة الحصول المسبق على نسخ
institutions
من رخص
that are
التوريد من البلد
involved in
المورد لهذه
the
المواد
import
قبل
of
الشروع في عملية
the
الشحن وخاصة
substances,
بالنسبة للمؤسسات
the
الموردة
controlled
العاملة تحت الرقابة
substances. They
الديوانية أو
have
المؤسسات
to
المنتسبة بالمناطق
cooperate and
المتمتعة
give the necessary
بالامتيازات
guidance
الجبائية
to
والتي تكون
those
عادة غير معنية
companies
بالحصول على
and
التراخيص
also to
المسبقة
the
للتوريد
custom
وعدم خضوعها
departments
إلى نظام
so
الترخيص
that
المسبق من قبل وحدات الأذون الوطنية.
authorization documents would be available, and we are ready to participate in the contact group to discuss this
secrétariat pour avoir mis ce point à l'ordre du jour. Et mes remerciements vont aussi également à l'endroit des pays ou des partis qui ont proposé effectivement, qui ont communiqué ces données et qui ont pris des dispositions contre ces délinquants du commerce illicite ici, des substances qui appauvrissent la population. S'agissant du CRP de l'Union européenne, Madame la coprésidente,
comprenant qu'il faut
Co-Chair,
contrôler à la fois
there's a need
les importations
to
et les
control
exportations
both
de
imports
toutes les
and
substances qui
exports of
appauvrissent la
all
couche d'ozone
substances which deplete
par toutes les
the
parties,
ozone
comme
layer
demandé
by
par
all parties, as
l'amendement
is
de
stipulated
Montréal au
under
protocole de
the
Montréal,
Montreal
ayant à
Amendment to the
l'esprit
Montreal
aussi que des
Protocol.
travaux
There's also the spirit
réalisés
of the
sur
need
la
for the work
mise
carried out
au point des mesures de lutte
in
contre
updating
ici, le
measures
trafic
to
illicite
counter this
dans
illegal
le
trade
cadre ici de l'approche stratégique de gestion
part of the
internationale
strategic
ici des produits chimiques.
management for chemical
Et
production.
nous constatons
And
et
we
constatons aujourd'hui qu'il y a des
today
défaillances sur ce
observe
plan.
that there
Nous
are,
devons
observe there are
analyser si
shortcomings
certaines
in this
parties
regard,
déjà
and we need to
ont
analyze
des
whether
avances ou
certain
des expériences dans le
parties
cadre ici
have
de renforcement
certain
des institutions axées sur le
advantages
système
or
de
the
licence
benefits
de
in
commerce
best practices in
illégal et
countering
le respect ici des
illegal
règles.
trade.
Donc, c'est pourquoi il est important
And for
aujourd'hui
this reason, there's an
de
important
mettre ici en
need
place ici
to
un système de renforcement des
establish
institutions pour
an
lutter
institution
efficacement
building, an
contre le commerce
institution
illicite
strengthening
en
system
incluant
to
non
counter
seulement
illegal trade
la détention,
by identifying
la
by
réexportation et
highlighting
le
not just
transit.
detention,
C'est pourquoi je
export
joins
and
les
transit.
autres pays
And
en
for this
demandant
reason,
effectivement
I
la
join
mise
other
en
countries
place
in
d'un groupe
calling
de
for the
contact pour
establishment
approfondir
of a
les
contact
analyses
group
sur ce
to have
CRP.
more
Et
in-depth
nous sommes
analysis
disposés
on
vraiment
this
à participer.
CRP, and
Je vous
we
remercie.
stand ready to contribute to this effort. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Following other speakers, we also wish to thank the Secretariat
et
for
surtout les
this
pays qui ont
summary,
pu
and we
envoyer
specifically
ces points. Il y
thank
a
those
d'autres pays
countries
qui
who
n'ont
have
pas encore
provided
fait. C'est sûr que à la
data.
prochaine compilation, vous
And
aurez
in the
aussi
next
d'autres pays.
compilation, there will be
Effectivement, le
other
commerce
countries.
illégal,
The
c'est un
illegal
sujet très
trade
pertinent
is a very relevant
qui va
issue,
au-delà des
and this is an
prérogatives
issue
du
which
Bureau
goes
national
beyond
aux
the
zones de
prerogatives
chaque
of
pays,
national
mais de
offices
toutes les
in
parties
various countries,
prenantes,
but also
notamment la
covers
douane
all state
et
parties,
le
all
commerce.
stakeholders.
Ce qui fait appel à
related to this
l'implication de
trade,
ces
and
corps de
this
contrôle dans leur
requires
renforcement de capacité.
oversight in capacity building.
Mais au-delà, on ne
But
pourra pas tout
beyond this,
dire. C'est pour ça qu'on soutient la proposition de l'Union européenne par rapport d'abord au CRP proposé et surtout par rapport à la création du groupe de contact, que le Bénin se joint au groupe qui sera mis en place à cet effet, afin qu'on puisse vraiment réfléchir sur comment s'en sortir. Parce que c'est un véritable phénomène. C'est un phénomène, on va dire. Merci.
Thank you.
Malaysia delegation would like to thank the Secretariat for compiling the information and also the data on combating illegal trade. And Malaysia recognized that there is room for improvement in the international process of dealing with illegal trading of controlled substance under the Montreal Protocol. Like others Article 5 Group 1 parties, Malaysia started to control the importation of HFCs and HFCs blend on 1st January 2024 through the approved permit and quota allocation. The control of the importation of controlled substances under the Montreal Protocol is getting more and more challenging as the numbers of type of those chemicals is increasing with different blends while phase out the HCFC. Compilation of information on illegal trade and production and consumption of controlled substance reported by parties is a good reference and lesson learned for the parties to strengthen the international and regulatory framework to combat the illegal trade. We noted that there are alarming cases of illegal importation and trade under the others MBA that prompted us to take precautionary actions and elevate the enforcement activities. Those illegal activities could damage the environment, risk the health of the local community, and cause leakage to the state and national revenue. Malaysia will continue to the effort to ensure compliance with the obligation under the Montreal Protocol, and we look forward to further discussion in this matter. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
My list. And we see there's a clear interest to discuss this issue in a contact group, and therefore the proposal from the co-chairs is to establish a contact group. And those who would like to discuss this, please join the contact group for further discussions. The date, time, and the room for this meeting, we will announce it on the screen. And since it's the lunchtime, we would like to close the plenary now. And if the Secretariat could post the contact group meeting schedule. Yes, we will have the HELON's contact group this afternoon, and the co-chairs for the group is Andrew Clark from USA and Ali from Saudi Arabia. Have a good lunch, everyone, and come here. Oh, and there's an announcement from the Secretariat. Secretariat.
Thank you,
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 Thank you, everyone. 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 Everyone.